Welcome back again to our ongoing series on the glories of Vrindavan during this very auspicious month of Kartik. Welcome. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Dishatane. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So during this month of Kartik, on our parikramas, we have discovered a number of new places. And today I wanted to share one of them with all of you. I had never been there before. Very beautiful place. Actually, just outside Vrindavan town. It's a temple complex called Tarasa Mandir. Tarasa Mandir. And the Krishna deity there is named Radha Vinod. And this deity has many pastimes, famous for many pastimes actually here in Braj. He was discovered several centuries ago in the Padma River in East Bengal, which of course is now Bangladesh, by a famous king. Technically, he was not actually a king in the usual sense of the word, but he was a landlord. And he was called king because he owned a very large tract of land in a place called Tarasa. It's in the Padma district of Bangladesh. He was treated as a king by the local populace because he had so much land, he had so many cows, etc. So one night, this king, he had a dream in which he heard a voice say, "Sir, I am a deity. Please rescue me from the waters of the Padma River and take me home." So the next morning, the king went with his family priest. His name was Vancharama. And they started searching in the Padma River for this deity. And as Vancharama was looking around, he suddenly felt a hand tugging on his leg. So he reached down, and grabbing that hand, he pulled the deity of Radha Vinod from the river. Then, as requested by the Lord in his dream, the king took the deity home, where along with Vancharama, he and his wife began to serve Radha Vinod with great love and devotion, of course. But the peculiarity of Radha Vinod was that he was very demanding. Whenever he wanted something, he would appear to the king or Vancharama in their dreams and make requests. So on one occasion, Radha Vinod appeared in the king's dream, and interestingly, he asked him for a hookah, in which he wanted to smoke dried shavings of aguru wood. Aguru wood, of course, is not an intoxicant. It's a very sweet-smelling wood. And the deity wanted to taste that sweetness and smell that sweetness of the aguru wood. So the king, he bought a very expensive silver hookah for Radha Vinod. And Vancharama, the priest, started offering the hookah to Radha Vinod every day after the deity's meals. Now, I must say that in one version of this pastime, it stated that the Lord smoked tobacco in the hookah. And if that was the case, we should know that even though the Lord may smoke tobacco in a hookah, devotees should never imitate his activities. Tobacco is an intoxicant. We must always follow the four regulative principles that we vow at the moment of initiation. In Srimad Bhagavatam 10:33-30, it said, and I quote, "One who is not a great controller should never imitate the behavior of ruling personalities, even mentally. If out of foolishness an ordinary person does imitate such behavior, he will simply destroy himself, just as a person who is not Rudra, meaning Shiva, would destroy himself if he tried to drink an ocean of poison," unquote. Very important instruction. What to speak of a hookah, smoking tobacco, even eating pan or betel nut leaves as we see a lot of people do here in India, is not allowed for sadhakas, practicing devotees. I was reading in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila 15:16, quoting again, one day Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ate betel nuts offered to the deity, but they acted as an intoxicant, and he fell down on the ground unconscious. So in the purport to that verse, Prabhupada writes, and I'll recite this, it's very important, Prabhupada's instructions. Prabhupada writes, betel nuts are an intoxicant, and therefore the regulative principles prohibit eating them. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastime of fainting after eating betel nuts is a solid instruction to all of us that one should not touch betel nuts, even those offered to Vishnu, just as one should not touch grains on Ekadasi day. Of course, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's fainting had a particular purpose. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can do whatever he likes and eat whatever he wants, but we should not imitate his pastimes, unquote. So I was reading that in many cases in the past in Bengal, householders had habits such as hookah or pan, smoking hookah or eating betel nut. But Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur strictly forbade those activities for his disciples. He said, especially for the householders. Anyway, continuing with Radha Vinod's pastimes. On another occasion, some guests came to the king's home during the night while he and his wife were sleeping. And not wanting to disturb their sleep, Radha Vinod took the form of a little boy, opened the door, let the guests in, and began to entertain them. He told the guests, my father is sleeping now, but I can wake him up if you want. But the guest replied, no, please don't disturb him, we'll cook for ourselves. So Radha Vinod, again in the form of a little boy, went to the market to buy groceries for the guests. But he didn't have any money. So the shopkeeper was reluctant to give the little boy groceries on credit. So Radha Vinod gave him his golden bangles. The little boy was wearing golden bangles as collateral, saying, hold on to these until my father pays you tomorrow. So the next day, when the king woke up, he, a little surprised, his guests are there, he greeted them and he asked, when did you come? I was expecting you during the day, and who let you in? So they replied, we're sorry, we were a little late last night, but your son let us in. He's such a good boy. He even made arrangements for our dinner. Now, as the king didn't have a son, he was speechless. And due to his previous pastime with Radha Vinod, he suspected that Radha Vinod had manifested like his son and welcomed the guests. And his suspicions were confirmed when that shopkeeper came to his house that day with Radha Vinod's bangles, asking for the payment for the groceries. Hare Krishna. So now, concerning the king's wife, she was troubled by the fact that she had no offspring, or they had no offspring, her and her husband. And as such, in her dealings with Radha Vinod, she was often praying to him for a child. And by the Lord's mercy, after a few years, she was blessed with a very beautiful baby girl, whom she and her husband, the king, named Radha Vinodini. Radha Vinodini. Now the Acharyas, on commenting on this pastime, they write that Radha Vinodini was actually a partial expansion of Srimati Radharani. Radharani expands herself in many forms for Krishna's pleasure. In Krishna book, chapter 47, I was reading the other day, Prabhupada writes, quote, As Krishna has numerous expansions of Vishnu Murtis, so his pleasure potency, Radharani, also has innumerable expansions of goddesses of fortune. Innumerable expansions of goddesses of fortune. Radharani expands herself into various Shakti Tattva forms by her internal potency as multi-forms of the goddess of fortune. So it's described that when Radha Vinodini was 7 years old, while taking darshan of Radha Vinod, she spontaneously felt immense love and attraction for him. Naturally, we can understand. It's also written that the deity Radha Vinod became deeply attached to her, as we can understand. So the next day, this little girl told her parents she wanted to marry Radha Vinod. The parents were very confused. They had already arranged for a very handsome, rich zamindar, I mean, again, landlord boy, to marry Radha Vinodini. However, girls were married early in those days. However, Radha Vinodini insisted that now she would only marry Radha Vinod. So the king thought that she must be having some, childish dream or something. So in a joking way, he said to her, "My dear daughter, I have arranged your marriage with another boy, but if Radha Vinod comes to the marriage hall on the day of your marriage and sits next to you at the sacred fire, certainly you can marry him." And everybody present, they kind of smiled and laughed a little bit, Then himself laughing, the king said, "This means Radha Vinod will become my jamai," means my son-in-law. So that evening, Radha Vinodini, the little girl, she went before the deity, Radha Vinod, and she formally requested him to become her husband. So Radha Vinod spoke up, and he accepted her proposal, and he told her to go ahead with the marriage arrangements that her father had made for the boy her father had chosen for her. And he promised Radha Vinodini that he, the deity, would come on the marriage day and sit down in front of the fire before the boy came with his marriage party. So it's written that on that fateful day of the wedding, when Radha Vinodini was sitting next to the sacred fire in the marriage hall, Krishna came in and sat next to her. And not recognizing him, the king was surprised and said, "Who are you anyway? How dare you sit here?" So the Lord, who we can imagine was slightly disguised, replied, "Sir, I am that same person you rescued from the river." I am that same person you rescued from the river, Radha Vinod. And hearing this, the king almost fell over in ecstasy. But he wanted to check Radha Vinod's determination to marry his daughter. So in those days, zamindars, or landlords, as father-in-laws, would smoke a hookah with their jamai, their son-in-laws, to show that they were both serious about this proposal. So the king asked Krishna, or Radha Vinod, "Will you smoke the hookah with me?" The deity smiled because he already had a silver hookah. "Yes, of course I will, sir." So that day, Radha Vinodini and Radha Vinod were married. I don't know, it doesn't mention what happened to the boy she was supposed to marry, but that's not so important. That day, Radha Vinodini and Radha Vinod were married. Now, as the pastime unfolds, a few days later, the girl, Radha Vinodini, became very ill. And that night, the deity, Radha Vinod, appeared in her mother's dream and said, quote, "Radha Vinodini will not remain in this world much longer. Soon, I will take her home as my bride, unquote. So the Lord said, please make a murti of Vrindavan Eshwari Shrimati Radharani from the dried up Devadaru tree. It's a type of tree, Devadaru tree, in your courtyard. And upon the departure, upon the death of your daughter, she will merge into that deity of Radharani and thus attain me. Remember, she's an expansion of Radharani, the little girl. So when Radha Vinodini's mother woke up, she told the king about the dream. And they both wept. But their tears were a mixture of joy and sorrow, because they understood that their daughter would soon attain Radha Vinod's lotus feet, and that both of them, meaning their daughter as Radha and the deity Radha Vinod, would live in their house as a married couple in the form of deities, and they could serve them. They would serve Radha Krishna as a married couple. Of course, in our sampradaya, Gaudiya Vaishnava sampradaya, we don't worship Radha and Krishna as married. We worship Radha and Krishna in the mood of unwedded. It makes the pastimes more exciting. We've discussed that many times. So that day the king took the wood of the Devadaru tree that the Lord mentioned that was in his courtyard, and he fashioned a very beautiful deity of Srimati Radharani. And as soon as that murti was ready, it said the king's daughter, Radha Vinodini, she left her body and entered into that deity, mystically entered into that deity. So they worshipped that king and the queen. They worshipped the deity of Radha Vinod with Radharani in their home. So some years later, when the king died, his son, his name was Vanamali Rai, he became king. But unlike his father, he was materialistic and not very serious about maintaining the high standard his father had established for the deities. But one day, he was traveling on the back of an elephant, surrounded by royal guards, when suddenly a great devotee named Jagat Bandhu came passing by with a huge kirtan party. Hundreds of devotees were singing with him, with mridangas and kartals, while this saintly person, Jagat Bandhu, was dancing at the head of the procession. Now it's written that Vanamali Rai could not tear his ears and eyes away from that kirtan party and the sounds of the holy name. And it mentions specifically the saints dancing. He just couldn't take his eyes off that whole scenario. And becoming overwhelmed by this sight, he jumped down from his elephant, the king. It said, kicked off his royal slippers and started dancing in the midst of the kirtan. And afterwards, he bowed down before Jagat Bandhu, Baba, and requested him to visit his home there in East Bengal. So Jagat Bandhu accepted the invitation and visited Vanamali Rai. Actually stayed in his home for a number of days, explaining to him the science of Bhakti Yoga. And it's written, instilling in him love for the divine couples, love for the divine couple. So after that, Vanamali Rai became very enthusiastic and very serious in the seva to Radha and Radha Vinod in his temple. But it's mentioned he stopped the hookah offering, thinking it wasn't a proper traditional practice in puja. He became really serious. But Radha Vinod made his own arrangements to keep the hookah. One night he came in the the dream of the head pujari tending to those deities and said, please give me back my hookah. And when the pujari woke up and informed the king, Vanamali Rai, about the dream, Vanamali Rai made arrangements for the hookah seva to be restored. So centuries later, when East Bengal, now Bangladesh, was overrun by Muslim rulers, Radha Vinod, the deity, and Srimati Radharani were shifted here to Vrindavan. And the temple is still known as Tarasa Mandir, to, I guess, denote the original location of where it was in Bangladesh. And one can visit that temple and see Radha Vinod and that very special Radharani deity, and the Silver Hookah as well. I was mentioning we took our Kartik Parikrama party there the other day, and there's 2 hookahs on the altar, but the older one you can see, it's very old, it's silver, and it's right next to Radha Vinod. Yes, so this is the pastime of that special deity and his consort, Srimati Radharani. I hope that you enjoyed that, and I hope that you can take the opportunity to visit Tarasa Mandir next time you come to Sri Vrindavan Dham. Still have 2 weeks left of Kartik here, so we'll do some more research, go out and find some more special places, and share the pastimes with all of you. I hope you're having a wonderful Kartik. All glories to Prabhupada. Shishi Gaur Nitai ki, Shishi Krishna Balaram ki, Shishi Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Srimati Radharani ki, Shishi Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Mayapur Dham ki, Shri Krishna Sankirtan Yagya ki, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Jai Jai Sisi Radhe Shan. All glories to Prabhupada.